What is the specific role of this book? First, it will clarify things to consider what this book does not intend to be. In the first place, this book is not intended as a scare book or an eye-opener. The recent literature in this is ample. Future Shock, Moment in the Sun, Closing Circle, The Challenge of Man's Future, The Limits to Growth, not to mention individually any of the many magazine and newspaper articles constantly appearing, to point out the breathtaking gravity of our present fragile moment. Most of what will be said in this book regarding the hopelessness of present trends has already been said, and we will make it a point to avoid dramatic language henceforth. Secondly, this is not an architectural style book. Although we rely heavily on the aesthetic assumption that form follows function, we do so because it is in a sense a style-less assumption. Much of the information we include may prove useful for the propagandist of a given style, but we will attempt to remain stylistically neutral. Thirdly, this is not intended as a utopian book. Rather, it could be considered as a technical appendix to all utopian books. B.F. Skinner in his Walden 2 is one of the few utopianists who dared to get technical and quantitative. He informs us that Walden 2 has 1,000 inhabitants, and in one delightful part of the book he explains item by item the time savings that have enabled the working population of this 1,000 to cut their working day from 8 hours to 4. With the information in our book, that proposition could be tested out to see if it is really true. Unfortunately, most utopianists have blissfully neglected specific details, and to them this book should offer a challenge, namely, to prove that their utopia could work technically. From the viewpoint of this book, most utopian schemes have been the product of all play and no work. Fourthly, in this book, we will discuss techniques only to the extent that they affect requirements for supplies and equipment. For example, we will not instruct the reader on how to make soap, though we will itemize and quantify the ingredients in soap, the vats required, the energy consumed, and the conditions that must be maintained. Of books on techniques, there are many, starting from Diderot's Encyclopedia of the Trades and Industries, published in 1751, up to our own U.S. Department of Agriculture bulletins. Though we will not discuss techniques, wherever possible, we will document good sources for this information. Finally, this book will not attempt to simplify either homesteading or homestead design. Rather, it will attempt to present it in all its glorious complexity. There are very few books published on the art of homesteading, though recently they have begun to come out to meet the consumer demand illuminated and partially created by the Whole Earth Catalog. Some of these books are extremely inspirational. Noteworthy are The Owner-Built Home and Homestead, Your Engineered House, and the periodical Mother Earth News. Very recently has come out the First Time Farmer's Guide. All of these are extremely good as far as they go, but it is our opinion that they do the decentralist movement a certain injustice by making everything simpler than it is. The worst offender in this sense is Alicia Bay Laurel's charming book, Living on the Earth. It is romantic, childlike, simple, and very popular, but can stand at the opposite end of decentralist publications from this present book. We do not advocate the return to a simple life. We advocate the return to a complex life. Likewise, we cannot sympathize with the recent infatuation with spheres and domes, except to appreciate them as a series in the many kinds of structures which must be considered in rational design. In a word, we shall try to avoid simplifying or jumping to design conclusions. We are very impressed with the enormity of the amount of information carried in the past by the various homesteading cultures, and we shall try to be as complete. This book does intend to be in the tradition of Diderot. Denis Diderot was the first successful attempt to make trade secrets public knowledge. His encyclopedia was written and published in the second half of the 18th century. Its purpose, the democratization of technology. In the process, Diderot was heavily persecuted and spent time in jail. The result of his effort was, however, the production of a monumental work filled with beautiful engravings, and he did, in a sense, democratize technology. But in another sense, his purpose was aborted. It may be that technology is now not kept undemocratic by secretiveness of the trades, but it is kept so by centralization of the trades. A student in junior high school may nowadays look up soap in an encyclopedia and learn how it is made, but he has far less chance of ever seeing it done or doing it than a non-student of the same age in Diderot's time. As stated, this book will not instruct in soap making, but it will attempt to make again possible the decentralization of this and many other aspects of technology. We, in this book, will be attempting to establish the science and field of engineering of homestead design by compiling its handbook. The necessary data and formulas for this field of engineering are already available, but they are distributed throughout hundreds of specialized volumes and handbooks like the Handbook for Heating and Ventilating Engineers, Agricultural Engineering, Human Factors Engineering, the Encyclopedia of Organic Gardening, etc. Our purpose is to gather into one volume the information needed for the rational, non-cultural design of a homestead. For the establishment of this new science, we have not regarded any of the tools so heavily relied on by centralized technology off bounds. We have found essential to the complete processing of the enormous amounts of data traditionally carried by cultures, the use of a computer model. And we are greatly indebted to J.W. Forster for the techniques he has developed, originally for industry, for the analysis of and predictions of such complex systems as homesteads. Until very recently, the science of complete homestead design would have been impossible. In the process of developing a computer model for use in homestead design, we have developed a matrix upon which all material cultures can be described and compared. I have here noted this we call Wedge's paradigm, and that's elsewhere. A language is a cultural phenomenon similar to a technical culture, and a language can be described by the way it fits upon the matrix of all known human sound, quanta, phonetics, meaning quanta, semantics, and the way they can be combined. Of course, a finite number of possible sounds and meanings, from a finite number of possible sounds and meanings, an essentially infinite number of languages is possible. So it is with technical cultures. The number of different processes that can occur in a homestead is finite. The combinations selected by a given technical culture essentially are not. This matrix we have developed can describe a technical culture, but more importantly for our purposes, it can clarify the design for one. Finally, with the information and analysis techniques included in this book, we want to offer the tool to test out homestead propositions. We want to prove technologically and mathematically, though not necessarily socially and politically, that a decentralized economy is still a viable alternative. We want to answer emphatically the question, can it be done? Our approach is not romantic. Rather, it is rational in the extreme. This rationalist approach is in a time when there is quite a tide of sentiment running against rationalism. My response to anti-rationalism and much of the growing pot culture is that there is much to be said for them as mental states under normal conditions when one has the backing of a strong culture to take care of things, but that under the abnormal culturally deficient conditions of today, rationalism may help to undo the doings of the rationalism of the past in ways less traumatic than a total abandonment of rationalism might. Our approach, however, must not be confused with the technology will overcome blind faith that is keeping the wool over so many eyes. We use rationalism with shaking hands, but hoping to use it to free us from its slavery. Much of this book, we want to warn the reader, will not only appear unromantic, but downright undemocratic. Our heavy use of mathematics will no doubt appear this way, and all but the most devoted to the homestead movement should probably skip the sections dealing with the development of the computer model. Again, we can only assure the reader that we are aware of the apparent inconsistency, but feel that it is the best road open to us. Another aspect of our approach to this book, which may appear evident to the reader, is that it has been basically the work of generalists. Writing this book has involved an extensive crossing of traditional frames of reference. Just as a homestead is characterized by general labor, so is the description and design of one. Knowledge has for the past several hundred years been organized and recorded by separate specialized technical fields. We assert that a very natural way to specialize knowledge is by geographic division. The specialism we aim for is that which a homesteader can have in his 20 acres and everything that goes on it, a knowledge that can never be complete. We question the idea that anyone not very much of a generalist could have conceived of or produced this book. With the relinquishment of oneself to a nowadays minutely specialized occupational pigeonhole, one begins to lose both objectivity and whole understanding. The options to pigeonholes are few, however, and popping out of one pigeonhole into another and another invites a deluge of social stigma. We, the authors of this book, however, are proud of the generalism that we have been able to hold on to, and we have felt it as a defense in the sallies we have made into specialized camps to steal the treasures of the handbooks. Maybe I'll stop there for now.